What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. We are still waiting for some injury updates about some key Seattle Seahawks players from last night's game. So, while we're waiting, I thought it'd be a good time to go over the Pro Football Focus grades for the Seattle Seahawks in their game against the Browns last night. You guys know how it works by now. I did this for the first two games. We're just going to kind of go through various PFF charts. Again, I want to stress that PFF is a good tool to use. PFF is certainly useful, but at the same time, you shouldn't be basing your entire evaluation off of their evaluation. There are times where PFF seems to get things wrong, and there are times where PFF definitely gets something wrong, and we just have to use our common sense here and try to pull apart what exactly they're trying to say. Usually they have something good to say, but sometimes the conclusion they get to is driven by something that is just plain off. So, here are the PFF grades for the Seattle Seahawks on offense. Let's go ahead and check it out here. We're not going to go through every single piece of this, but we're going to go through a lot of it. Looking at the top players on the Seahawks offense, you can see that 3 of the top 5 were guys who only played one drive, the first drive. JSN, DK, and Gino. Each of them played 5 plays, the first 5 plays of the game for the offense, and that was it. So they all graded out really well because they all did their job, they all performed, and then they all hit the bench and chilled out for the rest of the game. So that's that makes sense, right? You would expect those guys to be graded out really well. JSN had the 2 catches, Metcalf caught a touchdown, Gino went 4 of 5. So getting off to a pretty good start in that regard, but it's a tiny sample size. So if you want to find somebody who played a big chunk of the game and got graded out really well regardless, because it's obviously harder to maintain a high grade when you're playing a lot of snaps, George Holani stole the show. George Holani was almost the highest graded player despite playing 5 times as many snaps as the key starters that I just mentioned. His pass block grade in particular was really good, over an 80. His run grade was 84. And he actually easily, according to PFF, outperformed the other main running back of the day, who was Kenny McIntosh, despite playing more than double his number of snaps. So, really good game for him. I think he was going to make the roster anyway, but he's definitely going to make the roster now. Not to, by the way, let me be very clear here. McIntosh did not play poorly. In fact, he was graded out well too, 72.9. It was his pass block grade that really drug him down, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But McIntosh played well, but Holani did more, at least according to the PFF grading. All right, so you got a good grade here for Raekwon O'Neal. Now, he's a guy who we probably don't have room for, but he was graded out respectably, 82.3. Cody White, I don't know. I would be interested to know if PFF gives him any credit for his 80-yard touchdown, but I could buy that he has this good of a grade just based off his plays that did count, because he did make other plays in that game outside of that 80-yard touchdown. So Cody White graded out really well. Chenault and Eskridge both graded out identically. Actually, pretty interesting here. Given the fact, and this is where I have to question PFF, how is Eskridge 54.6 with his run blocking grade when he literally ran into a running back on 4th down? Like, I know that's just one play, but that's a hugely impactful play in this game. So that's a situation where I feel like they're trying to be a little too robotic, where a little bit of context needs to be brought in here, where this should probably be much lower. That was one of his few opportunities to make an impactful run block in this game, and he completely blew the play single-handedly almost. So that would be an instance where I think PFF is just kind of missing key context there. But I'll say this, both players graded out pretty well. Eskridge, probably his final game ever here in Seattle, and he made at least a little bit of an argument to make another team. More on special teams than offense, but he did contribute offensively. Let's see here. What else do we got? Howell ended up with an okay grade. I think this sells him just a little bit short. 64 grade. I don't know. I think that he probably did a little bit better than that. I know he took a couple of sacks that he didn't need to take. I know that he lost his biggest play of the game to a penalty, but I think that Howell did his job a little bit more than this represents. Let's see here. What else do we got? What else do we got? Most everything else in this game was relatively nondescript, like Jake Bobo's down here, 54.6. It's a small sample size, but he's not been graded well in general this preseason. Mike Jarrell had his lowest grade so far of the preseason, but it's still not bad given how far behind he's going to be these other players in development. And then as you keep going down, you start getting to the guys who did not get graded out very well, like Derek Young. I didn't really see him out there yesterday. It is worth noting that he did not get targeted once in that game. He was not graded very well. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if he's going to make this team or not at this point. And you got a bunch of guys at the bottom here who were just kind of nondescript. PJ Walker still gets a really bad grade. McClendon Curtis. Brady Russell actually graded terribly in this game after pretty good grades the first two times. AJ Barner way at the bottom here. Kobe Lewis pretty low as well. So a lot of stuff that's just kind of, a lot of these guys are either not going to make the team or will not play very much, if at all, this season if they do. So nothing overly shocking. To get into the offensive line now, Christian Haynes picked up a penalty in this game and still was graded out pretty well. And that's hard to do. PFF will dock him significantly for that penalty, and he still came up at about a 67. So that's encouraging as well. I'm not 100% sure where he played most of this game. PFF lists him as a left guard, but I'm pretty sure he played left guard and right guard. I don't know what the exact splits are right now. I'll look it up later. We also got a decent performance from Sundal. Forsyth was okay. Cross only played 5 plays, but he was fine as well. And this is, by the way, another thing that confuses me. His overall grade is a 64.1, but his pass block grade is a 79.4. And pass blocking is literally all he did in that game. He played 5 snaps. They were all pass block snaps. Make it make sense, because it doesn't. The math is not mathing. It is worth noting, not that I think that this is going to be a thing that changes anyone's mind. Bradford was graded a little bit lower than Haynes. Bradford was not graded out that well. I think he allowed a pressure, which is what knocked him down. I still think Bradford gets the start when the season starts over Haynes, but it is worth noting that Haynes probably did a little bit better than him, even with the penalty. We got 5 reps out of Laken Tomlinson, so he did start and play in that first drive in that game, and I mean, he did fine. Again, I'm looking at this, though. Make it make sense. 62.6 overall, 77.9 pass block grade. Pass blocking is literally all he did. The math is not mathing. That doesn't make a lot of sense here. But I don't know. Maybe somebody out there can make some sense of this, because my brain is scrambled over that one. Doesn't really line up with common sense. Forget anything else. Like, that doesn't pass the basic smell test. And most of the other offensive linemen in this game were relatively nondescript or just a little bit bad, like McClendon Curtis. If you go over to their actual like pressures allowed chart, you can get an idea of. I think I may have to zoom out a little bit here. Yeah, I think I do. You can get an idea of who was allowing what. One thing that's worth noting is that according to PFF, none of the sacks. There were 2 sacks in this game. None of them were attributed to a blocker. So they think that the sacks in this game were both on Sam Howell. Worth noting. And I don't necessarily agree entirely with that, but I can understand why it might be weighted a little more that way than towards the blocker, I guess. Right, so some of the stuff that was allowed: Lomia allowed a QB hit, Garrett Greenfield allowed a quarterback hit, Bradford allowed a pressure, and Fant allowed a hit. Fant is a guy we may unfortunately just have to lean on a little bit early in the season, and maybe a lot later in the season as well. It's very possible. Oluwatimi, 1 hurry allowed as well. He did not have a very good game overall, I think. It was just kind of mediocre. McClendon Curtis allowed a hit. And he also had the penalty as well, which is why he was graded out so low. Jalen Sundell did allow 1 hurry. That was it in terms of just the raw stats, the numbers. I will say this, though. Obviously, PFF does things their own way, but Kenny McIntosh only had 1 snap of pass protection, didn't allow a pressure or anything like that, and they still give him this miserable 16.7 grade. So on the one hand, that makes me think maybe they're just a little bit off here. On the other hand, it tells me that he did something really, really bad on that play. I'm going to have to go look at it later. And he just didn't give up a pressure on it for other reasons. But this is the hole in his game right now. Pass protection is the hole in his game. And if he can't do it, then you got to take him out of that situation entirely. I'm hoping this team understands that. But other than that, pretty much what you would expect. Let's jump on over to the defensive side of the ball now. Let's take a look at some of these defensive grades. I'll zoom back in real quick here. So, by far, the best graded player was Dodson, who played 7 snaps. So I think he played that first drive, and that was literally it. He almost had an interception. He had a couple other good reps as well. So, pretty excited about Tyrell Dodson going into this season. I think both preseason games he's actually played, he's done really well, but it's been very small sample sizes. Witherspoon similarly graded out really well in a very small sample size. There are a couple other players like that. Julian Love had one big play in this game, the tackle for loss, and he got graded out pretty well in 7 plays. Blake Lynch actually pretty good graded in just 3 plays. Murphy got in pretty good grade in 2 plays. He only played 2. Jaron Reed was graded out well in 5 plays. So, decent chunk of guys here at the top are guys who played less than 10 snaps. And also, there aren't a lot of overwhelmingly amazing grades in this bunch. There are a lot of grades that are just like, pretty good, solid, effective. So, the guys that really should be called out positively right now, I think, would be Ty Okada, who played basically that whole game and was graded out really well overall. So, PFF likes what they see there. And a guy like Patrick O'Connell, who made a couple nice plays out there and was rewarded with his grade, particularly in run defense, but overall it was a good game for him as well. And DJ James, and we'll get to DJ James more a little bit later, but his tackling grade was what boosted him. And that's the DJ James kind of weakness, right? That's the DJ James issue, the fact that he doesn't tackle. So you got to give credit where credit's due here. He didn't play a perfect game, but he found a different kind of way to rally that grade up. He didn't do it necessarily through amazing coverage. He did it by being good in run support and tackling. So he's in a dogfight to make this team. Maybe the Artie Burns injury has kind of secured his spot, but DJ James getting some credit for finding an unconventional way to do well. Keon Bars, actually, we got to talk about him a little bit as a practice squad guy, I think, at this point. He played a lot of this game and played pretty well. And a couple of the beat reporters on Twitter were actually calling him out positively as well. So that's certainly interesting. Mike Morris, good lord, another dominant preseason game. He had 5 QB pressures in this game. His thunder's getting stolen a little bit by Jamie Sheriff being so good, but 5 pressures in one preseason game from Mike Morris. Granted, he played most of the game, but he's had a dominant preseason so far, and I think it's time to get excited. I think it's time to get pretty pumped about where this is headed right now for Mike Morris. So he looks ready to have a very impactful 2024 season. So really exciting stuff there. He got dinged a little bit on his run defense, but I'm always going to be a little more forgiving of lackluster run defense if you're getting after the quarterback, because that is more important in the modern game. And then you get down into the grades that are a little bit more nondescript, like Tyrese Knight had an okay day, 65.8. I'll live with that. I mean, he played a big chunk of the game, made some nice plays against the run. His tackling grade was up there. He made a really nice play against a screen pass. I called that out in the video last night. Nehemiah Pritchett, by the way, also really good tackling grade, and that's his weakness as a player. So he is making the strides where he needs to make the strides. So encouraged by what I saw from both rookie corners. Not really a ton else going on here. A lot of this stuff again is pretty nondescript. You start getting down into this area, you find some guys who struggled a little bit, like kind of read into this as you will. Jamie Sheriff was graded poorly because of his, I think this is his tackling grade. Yeah, he had a really bad tackling grade. So even though he had 5 pressures and 2 sacks in this game, he was graded out really badly. I guess the only thing that might be a little bit alarming would be Derek Hall. Now, he didn't play a lot, but he was one of the worst graded players on the team, and he got 2 pressures. So I don't know if this is alarming or this is just PFF doing PFF stuff, but it is, I mean, it is, it's at least something we need to discuss for a couple minutes, I think, right? So, Derek Hall, they really didn't like what they saw from him. Nwosu was the worst graded player, I think, because he got the penalty. I would assume it's because he picked up the penalty, which I don't even know if it was a good call or not, so I'm not going to stress on that. I am stressing on whether or not he's going to be ready to go for the opener, but we'll find out about that later today. The thing that really stands out from this collection of plays is 26 QB pressures in this game. 26. Jamie Sheriff and Mike Morris were kind of the leaders there, but you also had Mario Kendricks with 4. Like I said, Derek Hall with 2. Levelston had 3. Now, that's a guy who's not going to make the team, but a lot of these guys are. DJ James actually had 2. Not very often you see a cornerback with more than 1. I think one of his was just like a QB scramble that got aborted, and then he got up there and made the tackle. So that wasn't really a normal pressure, but you can kind of see the way in which it just adds up when all your guys are okay. Nelson Caesar had 1. Michael Barrett had a QB pressure. Radigan had a QB pressure. And it just adds up to the point where you're just overwhelming the other team with quarterback pressure. So that's great. Some stuff from last night's game defensively was not great, but the QB pressure stuff is. And I want to look at the coverage stuff here real quick, just kind of individually to understand where things may have gone wrong, because we did get lit up a little bit in the secondary at times. So DJ James was graded out in coverage fairly well, but he did allow 34 yards on 4 targets. And I'm contrasting that with somebody like Nehemiah Pritchett, who gave up 5 completions on 7 targets, but only 22 yards. So that's 3 yards per target, whereas DJ James gave up like 8.5 yards per target. So I know he got a better grade from PFF, but I'm looking at this and I'm going, the efficiency is just not there. The effectiveness per snap is not really there. A lot of these other guys near the top of the list didn't really give up a ton. D. Williams gave up the 19 yards, including the 15-yard touchdown right at the end of the game. Blair only gave up the 6 yards, which is actually really good for him because he got beat up in coverage last week. And when you get down to the bottom of the list, you start to see the guys that were really getting slapped around a little bit in coverage out there. Probably the biggest culprit being Kobe Bryant. He gave up the really long touchdown, or at least PFF gave him the blame for it. I know some people will say it's Pritchett, but they're giving it to Kobe. And he ended up giving up single-handedly about 80 yards in coverage. And as a safety, that's really not good. So mostly it's on one big play, but a lot of it isn't on that play either. So he's kind of the big culprit here if you're wondering why the defense got beat up so bad. But Artie Burns, he only played 8 snaps before he got hurt in this game, but he gave up 31 yards on those 8. Carlton Johnson, a little bit as well. Jamie Sheriff. I don't know why Jamie Sheriff's in coverage this much. He should probably focus on the things that he's good at. This is what really hurt his grade. He had a 30 coverage grade, gave up 36 yards on 5 targets, and had 1 penalty. Maybe you should take him out of coverage. That's probably a big part of the problem you have here. But yeah, that basically identifies most of the main reasons why we got beat up in coverage throughout this game. So that's what I wanted to look at on defense. And special teams, it has to be said, Brady Russell had a bad game on offense, didn't really make an impact. 81 special teams grade. So he is still finding ways to positively contribute. I don't think it's going to be enough to make the team. I don't, but it is worth noting he's one of the better special teamers out there. And he was graded out a lot better than a guy like Derek Young, right? I mean, Derek Young, very nondescript grade in this game. And I think that's going to be the tiebreaker here for some of these bottom of the barrel roster spots. Other guys who did well on special teams were Halani, Radigan, McIntosh, and Levelston, and O'Connell. So that's going to factor into some decision making over the next few days here. But that's basically a PFF rundown. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if anything stands out to you that I didn't mention, or just talk about the same things that I talked about. That'd be fine too. So I will see you guys later today. Hopefully we get injury updates at some point. When we do, I will make a video. But for now, PFF grades, that's what they say. Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? What stands out to you? Go Hawks.